Welcome to the TTS Talking Educators podcast. Each week we'll be joined by educational experts from across the globe, offering exclusive insights, inspiration and guidance to help practitioners unlock the potential for learning in educational settings. Hello, my name is Dr. Shaddai Tembo, your host for this week's TTS Talking Educators podcast. I am a senior lecturer at Bath Spa University, an associate lecturer at the Open University, and an independent speaker, writer and consultant with critical early years. Throughout this series, we'll be discussing a range of topics aimed at supporting oracy in primary and early year settings, inspiring you with guidance and resources to enhance your practice. This week, I'm delighted to introduce Rob Jennings as our guest. Welcome to the podcast, Rob. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you very much.
Brilliant. Just before we get started, perhaps you could give an introduction to yourself for our listeners.
Yeah, I've been a maths specialist teacher for the last 15 years. I'm really passionate about helping people that struggle with maths. I'm a co-founder of the Dyscalculia Network, which is a place where people can go to get information. Lots of great, useful information and downloadable resources for teachers and parents on our website.
Excellent. And now we are in episode 2, having defined and sought to understand the role of dyscalculia. Now we're going to be looking more at practical strategies in terms of language and number sense. I guess it's the latter of those that perhaps we could start with, as for me, I do teach early childhood language education at university, but number sense is a little bit less familiar in terms of that phrase. So I'd be interested to hear from you about your understanding of that and what that means for children with dyscalculia.
Yeah, so if you define number sense, it's the child's intuitive understanding of numbers and the number relationships. So things like understanding quantities, comparing numbers, which is larger, which is smaller. It's really, those sort of things are really quite significant when you have which some people say a simple calculation like 8 plus 5. Often you hear teachers say, oh, just start with the bigger number and then add on. But if someone's struggling to understand the relative value of numbers, then they're not going to be able to do that. It's about counting accurately, and often children with good number sense can count accurately fast forward, but then counting backwards can often be a problem where you have weaknesses in working memory and things like that. Estimating amounts to understand relative value if they're accurate or reasonable answers, and also to recognise patterns. So these are all the early understanding and intuitiveness of number sense.
Really, it's a range of different ways in which children learn that kind of come under this idea of number sense, and that perhaps comes more intuitively or instinctively to us without dyscalculia, but for those with it, it seems more difficult to be able to grasp those things in their everyday learning, right?
Yeah, absolutely. If you think about the early years as being the really key area to help, because it's where you play and you discover and you learn to reason and understand. If that kind of is lessened or aborted in any way, you miss out on all of those key sort of exploring opportunities to understand what numbers mean, and it becomes more abstract. So that we see the difficulty later on when you don't have that opportunity, because it means that their understanding and their reasoning is much weaker.
I'm hearing an argument for more play in schooling contexts there, Rob. Is that fair to say? I
think so. And you know, as I said in episode 1, maths is such an abstract topic. It's really difficult to understand some of the things unless you are given the opportunity to use concrete materials to model what you're talking about. It's not just in early years, but throughout whole school. We don't use enough concrete materials to do that, and there's such a lot of really good stuff out there. And I go into schools and do a lot of interventions and a lot of teacher training. And in secondary schools, for example, I get answers, oh, we can't use concrete materials, they're too babyish. And I'm thinking, well, You can use algebra tiles. There's 3D shapes that you can sort of disassemble and use as kind of nets to work out the surface area, for example. So it's really important to allow our learners to be able to sort of show what these abstract concepts are all about. So absolutely a big advocate of concrete materials.
Yeah, that's really useful to hear. And more pragmatically, because teachers will be working in schools where play isn't possible, and they do have to follow those more traditional lesson formats. What other strategies or methods can we employ to help children understand mathematical concepts?
So just to sort of finish off concrete materials,
Sorry.
We need to develop using those as a normal way of working. Not just, I went into a school a couple of weeks ago and the teacher knew I was coming in, knew I liked concrete resources, and she had this big pile of materials that they were working on, and she plonked them down in front of an individual child that was struggling. And you could physically see him like shrink into his chair. A normal way of working should be concrete materials should be available for all students, not just SEND students, because it's a really good way of modelling how things work. And they should be available in the middle of the table so people can dip in and dip out. Someone might be a bit weaker in geometry or something like that, and that visual spatial might not be as developed as it should be. And so they need those materials to be able to show what these 3D shapes look like and the difference between those and 2D. So I think that kind of is really important to sort of help with that. I think in older years, I think the syllabus is too big. We try and teach too much. It's often if the syllabus is too big, then you're struggling to really teach the whole of the syllabus. Whereas a lot of our students who are in SEN need that revision and repetition to be able to sort of consolidate this thinking rather than moving on. Well, it's fractions this week, it's shapes next week. And that doesn't really help to consolidate and allow that reasoning and that discourse and conversation with these kind of topics.
Yes, I'm hearing there for the resources and activities that are useful for children with dyscalculia are actually useful for all children. That'd be fair to say.
Yeah. We use a lot of maths games as well to reinforce topics, but also to allow students to be able to really enjoy maths. It's got such a bad PR in terms of, you're a maths teacher. We want it to be sort of fun and relevant. It needs to be maths is all around us, the life skills in maths, rather than an abstract topic of things. It's much more relevant and important in terms of moving forward. And I think it doesn't have that.
I'm thinking about what you're saying around more play, more concrete resources, and I'm thinking about the responses of teachers who say that sounds great in theory, but in reality we have lots of constraints on our time, the curriculum, we have to teach that. How does that land when you deliver that training?
Well, I'm a maths teacher too, and I'm in school 2 days out of 5 at the moment. It would be more, but I need time to do other things. And in one of my schools I'm at the moment, I must have upset the timetable because I have the graveyard shift on a Friday afternoon, double maths. So trying to get that, I make sure I don't teach any new concepts during that sort of window. I use maths games as a lot to reinforce topics, because when you're playing a game with someone, you're almost disarming them. You're improving their confidence and reducing any anxiety they might face. But it acts as a really good way of, it's like an informal assessment. So if I can see what they're doing in the game and they don't think it's work really often, and they're enjoying playing the game, I can see what I need to reinforce and revise, and what they know, what they don't know. So I use games a lot to sort of reinforce those topics. There's loads of really good games out there. And I think the oracy in maths is supported by maths games. Just to get the best out of people when you're playing maths games is to ask questions. How many am I behind you? What do I need to roll to be able to fill that in using dice? And it's an understanding of using dice as a way of sort of understanding what number sense refers to. When I think of the number 5, I think of the dot pattern for 5. And I can use that to manipulate numbers by if I take away 1, take the 1 out the middle, automatically I can see the visual hook, the visual way of demonstrating that is 4.
It's really showing that. I guess I'm thinking about the attitude that we have towards math as a society that we've touched upon. Also, the need for teachers to think more positively about it within that and change their own experiences that they may have had in the past that were negative, and really not put that onto the children they're working with.
Yeah, I think it goes back to teacher training. In teacher training, there's little or no SEN and absolutely minimal maths compared to literacy, and it's one of the things that we're advocating to change. We need to prepare our teachers better, give them the techniques to be able to help. We don't really do that very well at the moment across the board, and it's a message that's gone all the way back to the Department of Education to try and help improve that. If teachers are coming out in primary school teachers and they have any anxiety with maths at all, they're going to translate that onto their children, or they're going to teach in such a sort of a stiff way because of lack of confidence. This means that those pupils are not getting the benefit of having someone that really is confident and enjoys mathematics.
I think what you were saying there about the Department for Education maybe not placing an emphasis on maths as much as you like is quite interesting. Perhaps you could just say a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think kind of we have a discussion ongoing with the Department of Education where I think first of all the mathematics syllabus is too big, and it means it forces the teachers to be able to sort of to rush, and there's less opportunities to revise certain topics. But I think kind of in teacher training there isn't enough emphasis on the amount of support and practice and teaching of mathematics for both secondary and for primary, especially for the SEN people, the people that struggle with maths. We're not preparing our teachers to sort of help those students in any way, and there are a number of ongoing discussions at the department level which will hopefully have an impact in the future. There is the government have recently set up a neurodiversity task force that's representatives from all of the different area neurodiversities to be able to look at how we're doing and what we can do better in the future. I think that's quite a positive statement to look at how we can improve things.
Yeah, and I'm wondering about how dyscalculia does overlap with other neurodiversities such as dyslexia or dyspraxia. Do we typically see a child just having one of those, or is it typical to see an intersection?
Part of the new definition is that co-occurrence is the norm rather than the exception. It's very rare that you have someone that's really this is a definition that doesn't impact on other areas, but it's kind of co-occurrence is really significant. Right? The British Dyslexia Association talk about 60% of people with dyslexia have some form of maths difficulties, and you can imagine any kind of word problem that you're presented with. It's even if you're able to read the words, it's the comprehension of what you're reading to be able to know what maths is required after. And that's quite a significant chunk of that. I think in terms of organisation, people with ADHD, the ability to sort of stay on task and sort of remain focused is going to impact on certain people and different lessons in certain parts of the day. I think we have to be more attuned to our students in terms of what we're trying to present to them and how best they're going to take to be able to sort of retain and understand it.
There's a real opportunity to reflect on what we're doing within our classroom environments that can best support all children to learn in a more effective manner that takes into account those learning differences that are in place.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good place to end this episode. So thank you so much, Rob.
You're welcome.
I would like to say a huge thank you to our guest Rob for joining us and providing such valuable insights. You've been listening to the TTS Talking Educators podcast with me, Dr. Shaddai Tembo, and Rob Jennings. If you've been inspired by our conversation today, don't forget you can sign up via the link in our episode notes to be the first to hear about future episodes and access exclusive follow-up content, including ideas for your setting and links to relevant resources.